start with women. Did you know that women are twice as likely to get Alzheimer's as compared to men? This is not just a random statistic. It is a fact backed by research. A study published in 2018 found that 2/3 of people diagnosed with Alzheimer's were women. Now, why is this so? One reason is that women tend to live longer than men, and age is the biggest risk factor for Alzheimer's. Let's dive deeper. Women tend to have estrogen drop as they near their 50s, and most researchers attribute the fall in estrogen to the decline in brain function in women. It is not just menopause. There are other risk factors at play. For example, when your menses first started, as well as how many babies you have delivered. So a mother of 5 is more likely to get Alzheimer's than a mother of 1. Next, we'll talk about men. You may think that men are off the hook because they are half as likely as women to develop Alzheimer's. But let's dive a little deeper so you understand. So there are different forms of dementia. Alzheimer's is the most well-known form of dementia. There are others like vascular dementia, but because Alzheimer's is so well-known, most people think that Alzheimer's equals dementia. Men are less likely than women to develop Alzheimer's, but men are twice as likely to develop another form of dementia. This form of dementia is called dementia of Lewy bodies. And Lewy bodies are another type of protein that you find in the brain. Now, dementia of Lewy bodies can be divided into 2 types. One of them is called Lewy Body Dementia. The other, and you've heard of this, is called Parkinson's disease. Both Lewy Body Dementia, LBD, and Parkinson's disease, PD, are associated with a high level of a certain protein in the brain. And this protein is called Alpha Synuclein. Alpha Synuclein proteins add up and they coagulate to form Lewy bodies. And that's why you call this type of dementia dementias of Lewy bodies. So far, we're learning that dementia affects both genders. It seems that women tend to get Alzheimer's and men tend to get dementia of Lewy bodies. And under dementia of Lewy bodies, we have LBD and PD, which is known as Parkinson's, and you probably have heard of Parkinson's. Note that in this class of conditions, it is not just about losing your memory, forgetting things and all that. This category of cognitive dysfunction often associates with movement dysfunction. And you can see that in Parkinson's disease, it's a movement disorder. But now we're also learning that patients with Parkinson's disease tend to develop cognitive disorder. What's interesting is that what we call LBD or Lewy Body Dementia starts in the mind, which is cognitive disorder, but then leads to movement disorders. So as a sort of summary, you can think of dementia of Lewy bodies as having both a cognitive mind component as well as a movement component. Before finishing off this video, I also want to talk about the proteins associated with Alzheimer's. We know that the protein associated with dementia of Lewy bodies is alpha synuclein, and alpha synuclein clumps up and becomes Lewy bodies. But in Alzheimer's, it's a different kind of protein in the brain. In Alzheimer's, you have 2 things. One of them is amyloid beta. Amyloid beta is what forms between brain cells. It sort of blocks communication between brain cells. The second type of protein that you find in a diseased brain is called NFT. NFTs are formed when a compound called tau becomes diseased. So tau becomes NFT. And NFT stands for neurofibrillary tangles. So you find tangled parts in the brain cell. So for women, you have beta amyloid and you have NFTs in the brain, and they're not good. For men, you have alpha synuclein, and that's not good. I hope this sort of summarizes gender and dementia. What I've done is associate different dementias with different genders. Broadly, it would be that women are more likely to get Alzheimer's, and Alzheimer's, you have beta amyloid and you have NFTs. In men, you tend to get dementia of Lewy bodies, which include LBD and Parkinson's. And these are conditions that not just affect the mind, but also affect movement. The difference between LBD and Parkinson's is that in LBD, you're more likely to see cognitive dysfunction appear first, and then later movement disorders. Whereas in Parkinson's, it's a movement disorder, but recent research is telling us that the movement disorder precedes cognitive dysfunction also. If you are interested in what LBD is, I have certain articles I've written, and one big Hollywood star associated with LBD is Robin Williams. Here's where it's going to start getting intriguing, because even though these are 2 categories of dementias, these 2 classes of neurocognitive disorders might actually do well being treated in a very broad sense from the same principles. There are a group of neurocognitive researchers who are working on what are the things we can do lifestyle-wise, diet-wise, supplement. Names to note include Dale Bredesen, Heather Sandison, Shai Efrati. So understanding these gender differences in dementia risk is not just an academic exercise. For one, it can inform you as a listener what to look out for. Hopefully over time, researchers can work towards improved outcomes based on gender, based on symptoms, and based on a whole variety of interventions that we can do, not just pharmaceuticals that do not work. For pharmaceuticals that do not work, you can read my research articles in reversebrainage.com. I hope this video was enlightening to you as much as this information was very useful for me.